It was a moonless night, the darkness shrouding the sleepy town in an eerie silence. Sarah, a young woman in her 20s, had just finished her late shift at the local diner and was making her way home. Her footsteps echoed in the empty streets, and her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. The narrow, winding roads were dimly lit by a few flickering streetlights, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with every passing breeze. Sarah was aware of the stories that circulated in town, cautioning women to be careful when walking alone at night. But she had always considered herself street smart and unafraid. As she turned a corner onto an even quieter street, Sarah sensed a presence behind her. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a man walking a few paces behind her. He was tall, dressed in a long, dark coat, and his face was hidden beneath a shadowy hat. The unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach grew as she quickened her pace. Sarah tried to dismiss her unease, telling herself that it was a coincidence, that he was just heading in the same direction. But as she continued her journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that his steps seemed to echo hers with unsettling precision. To test her growing apprehension, Sarah took an abrupt turn onto a side street, but the man followed suit, his presence growing even more unnerving. She quickened her pace, and so did he. Panic began to claw at her, and her heart pounded in her chest, desperate for help. Sarah reached for her phone to call a friend or the police, but her trembling fingers couldn't manage the task. She decided to head towards a more populated area, hoping to find someone who could offer assistance. But with each step, her stalker stayed hard on her heels. Her footsteps echoed in her ears, each one a thunderous reminder of the threat closing in on her. As she rounded a corner, her heart sank when she realized she was alone in a desolate alley. She knew she had to act first. The eerie silence of the night was broken only by the heavy breathing of the man behind her, his presence looming like a sinister shadow. In her desperate bid to escape, Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She let out a piercing scream that pierced the silence of the night. Her scream echoed through the alley, a cry for help that she hoped would reach someone, anyone, who could save her from the relentless pursuer. Sarah's desperate scream shattered the stillness of the night, a chilling cry for help that reverberated through the desolate alley. Her heart raced, and adrenaline coursed through her veins as she turned to confront the ominous figure that had been stalking her. In the dim glow of the distant streetlight, she finally caught a glimpse of his face as he stepped into the pale illumination. His eyes were curled and devoid of emotion, and a twisted smile played at the corners of his lips. Panic surged through Sarah as the realization struck her. This was not a chance encounter, but a sinister pursuit. Without a second thought, Sarah turned and bolted down the alley. Her footsteps echoed like thunder, but the man gave chase, closing the gap between them with each passing second. Fear clung to her like a vice, pushing her to run faster, her heart pounding with dread. She rounded another corner and emerged into a slightly busier street, gasping for breath as she sought help from the few late-night pedestrians. Her voice quivered as she called out for assistance, her words interspersed with sobs. The passers-by turned to see the scene unfolding, and a few rushed to her aid, their concerned voices ringing out, "The mysterious man," realizing he was outnumbered, melted into the shadows and disappeared into the night. The witnesses consoled Sarah, offering to walk her home and suggesting she contact the police. She gratefully accepted their support and recounted her harrowing ordeal to the officers who arrived on the scene. As she provided her statement, a sense of vulnerability and fear lingered in the pit of her stomach. The police assured her they would investigate the incident, but the knowledge that her stalker remained at large weighed heavily on her mind. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over, and she was left with a haunting sense of unease that would stay with her long after that fateful night. In the days that followed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her life like a dark cloud. She had never experienced such terror, and the constant fear that her relentless pursuer might return haunted her every step. The police had diligently investigated the incident, but their efforts had yielded little information. The only lead they had was a vague description of the man and the unsettling fact that he seemed to have vanished into thin air. With no further evidence or witnesses, the case seemed to stall, leaving Sarah with a profound sense of vulnerability. In an attempt to regain control of her life, Sarah decided to take self-defense classes. She learned techniques to protect herself and found comfort in knowing that she was better prepared to handle a threatening situation if it were to rise again. Her determination to be vigilant and strong fueled her desire to reclaim her sense of security. One evening, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from her older brother, David, who lived in a nearby town. He had heard about the incident and decided to pay her a visit. David was a protective older brother, and his arrival brought a measure of relief to Sarah. They spent the evening talking, reminiscing about their childhood, and catching up on each other's lives. As the night deepened, Sarah hesitated to bring up the frightening ordeal she had faced. But David, perceptive as ever, noticed her unease and gently encouraged her to share her experience. With a heavy heart, Sarah recounted the story of the night, the sinister stranger, and the relentless chase through the darkened streets. As she spoke, David's expression grew grave, and he took a moment before responding. "Sarah," he said, "I think I might know something about this." David explained that he had recently reconnected with an old friend, Tom, who had been living in their town. Tom had shared a bizarre and disturbing story about his involvement with a secretive group of individuals. The group, according to Tom, was obsessed with fear and had a history of terrorizing individuals as part of a twisted game. The more David shared, the more Sarah's blood ran cold. The details of Tom's account seemed to eerily align with her own experience. The unsettling realization that her stalker might be part of this group filled her with dread. David urged Sarah to contact the police and share this newfound information, hoping it might shed light on her assailant's motives and whereabouts. The next morning, Sarah met with the authorities and relayed the disturbing account David had shared. Sarah's revelation about the secretive group described by David's friend, Tom, sent shockwaves through the local law enforcement. The police launched an intensive investigation into the group and any potential connections to Sarah's ordeal. It was a race against time to unmask the sinister individuals responsible for her harrowing experience. As the investigation deepened, it became evident that this group was indeed involved in a disturbing underground network. They thrived on terrorizing unsuspecting victims for their own twisted amusement. Each encounter was a malicious game, played out in the shadows with the sole purpose of causing fear and despair. The police, working tirelessly to dismantle the group, enlisted the help of an undercover officer who infiltrated the organization. His findings shed light on the identities of the perpetrators, their methods, and the extent of their malevolent activities. It was a chilling discovery that sent shivers down the spines of those involved in the case. The man who had stalked Sarah that fateful night was soon identified as the ringleader of this malevolent group, known for his ruthless tactics and a penchant for preying on the vulnerable. With this breakthrough, the police were finally closing in on the people responsible for her torment. In the following weeks, a series of arrests were made, and the group's members were brought to justice one by one. It was revealed that their actions had left a trail of victims who had lived in fear, just like Sarah. The arrests brought a measure of closure to those who had been subjected to their torment. The courtroom trials that followed exposed the sinister motivations behind the group's actions, leaving no doubt about their guilt. As they were held accountable for their crimes, their reign of terror crumbled. Justice was finally served, and the townsfolk found solace in the knowledge that the nightmare was over. Throughout this tumultuous period, Sarah found comfort in the support of her friends and family, particularly her brother David, who had played a pivotal role in unmasking the darkness that had haunted her. Her determination to face her fears head-on and her bravery in sharing her story had led to the dismantling of the malevolent group. With the shadow of the malevolent group finally lifted, Sarah began to rebuild her life. The town, once gripped by fear, breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that justice had been served and that their streets were safer once more. Sarah's experience had transformed her into an advocate for personal safety and awareness. She became involved in community organizations that provided support and resources for those who had been victims of similar acts. Her story served as a beacon of hope for others who had faced terror at the hands of malevolent individuals. Her resilience and determination were an inspiration to her town, and her resolve to turn a traumatic experience into an opportunity for positive change became a source of strength. Sarah learned that in facing her fears and seeking justice, she had not only reclaimed her sense of security but also had the power to protect others from similar horrors. In the end, it was a story of triumph over darkness, of courage in the face of terror, and of a community that rallied together to support one of their own. Sarah's journey from victim to survivor was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of resilience in the face of the darkest of challenges.